it's raining today in Long Beach, so I figured that today would be a perfect day to talk about podcasts. And also because I got my new microphone and I'd like to test it with this vlog. So I'm really excited. And the reason why I got this microphone is because I plan to do more interviews in the future, and the microphone on my laptop for Heather's Happy Hour is absolutely terrible. So that's why I got this, and I'm going to test it in this vlog today. So right now, this is just the mic on my Canon S110, but moving forward in this vlog, I'm going to overlay the audio from this mic on top, and I hope you'll see the difference. Hi everyone, my name is Heather, and I am a vlogger, creator, and entrepreneur, and I'm documenting my entrepreneurial journey through vlogs on this YouTube channel. So if you like what you see, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. So when I started my entrepreneurial journey, oh, this is so cool. When I started my entrepreneurial journey, my very first, in the beginnings, I actually wanted to start a podcast more than anything. That was my original intention before Sharespark, before digital literacy, and before my idea evolved into this big, huge thing, even before vlogging. Even though I am a YouTuber and vlogger, I actually listen to podcasts way more than I do watch YouTube videos. There's just something about audio, radio, and podcasts that I've always loved. And that's why I wanted to start a podcast, because I love listening to podcasts. So in this vlog, I'm going to be talking about the importance of podcasts for you as an aspiring entrepreneur, just based on my experience. And I'm going to talk about it from two different angles. One as a listener, and another as a potential future podcaster. It's just another medium that you might want to consider in building your business, whatever it is, or your personal brand. Towards the end of the podcast, I'll be sharing with you my 5 favorite podcasts, and then I'll also be sharing the very first podcast I ever recorded. That's actually the only one I've ever recorded, but I'm going to be sharing it with you guys just because I have it and I thought it'd be funny for you to listen. 3 reasons to listen to podcasts as an entrepreneur. Number 1, to understand your audience. So a lot of podcasts are about people. A lot of podcasts are by experts and thought leaders in their industry, sharing their experience or interviewing other people in that industry to get their experience. And when you know what industry that you're in or what niche that you're in, it's so great to be able to listen to a podcast that is specifically about your industry and the field that you're in, because you can gain more insight to your audience. You can learn more about people, and you can learn more about how other people in your similar industry have been able to build an audience and connect with the same people that you're trying to connect with. And I think that is hard to find on other platforms. YouTube is just so convoluted with a lot of entertainment videos and videos that aren't, are just about anything. And same with Facebook and other platforms. There's just so much noise to have to cut through. Whereas podcasts, it's very, like I said, very topic specific. Number 2, to understand storytelling. So especially if you're new to podcasts, listening to podcasts and getting into podcasting can give you a really different perspective on how to tell stories. And as an entrepreneur, storytelling is probably one of the most important skills that you can have, because no matter what you're communicating, whether it's, you're selling, you're marketing, or you're giving instructions, or you're trying to, compose something for digital media, whether you're trying to script for a vlog, no matter whatever you're trying to communicate, if whatever you are communicating is told in the format of a story, it's always going to be more compelling. I remember that really stuck out to me when I was first getting into podcasts. I remember thinking there's just something really powerful about the storytelling experience through podcasts. And I think it's because there is no visual, there is no video. And the listener has to kind of, you still have that aspect of your imagination that has to kick in because you're not looking at anything. So it's kind of like, reading a book, right? You have to kind of imagine what the characters look like and stuff like that. So that's the same with audio. It's not as one directional as reading text, because you can hear the person's voice, but there's just something really intimate about just hearing someone's voice and then having to imagine what is going on and the story that they're trying to tell. Again, when you go through anything, whether you're watching videos or you're listening to a podcast or watching TV or anything, you always want to be mindful as a creator, what can you take away from the experience that you're going through, right? Because you are your best market research. So as you listen to podcasts, kind of think like, is this podcast sparking an emotional reaction in me? And if it is, how? And, what is it about that you can take away to tell your own stories, no matter what medium you're going to tell them on? And number 3, to learn, not just about your target market, but about anything. As an entrepreneur, you always have to be learning about everything, how you can improve yourself as a person, about trends and statistics, about your target market, about your industry. You just always have to be learning, because that helps you to stay relevant, that helps you to come up with ideas and stuff like that. So again, because you can get really specific with podcasts and choose the topics that you want to learn about, it's a great source of educational content. So as a podcaster, you might not have considered getting into podcasts as a way to build an audience as an entrepreneur. But for me, like I said, it was actually the first way, the main way that I was going to build an audience was through podcasts. And I want to give you 3 reasons, if you haven't considered podcasting as a medium before, why you should consider it. Number 1, podcasts are so much easier to produce than video, and they can seriously have just as much of an effect, if not more. So, just because video is, you have 2 senses, right? You have the visual and then the audio. Just because podcast is only audio, don't think that you're going to get half the experience. That's definitely not true. And it's just so much easier. I can tell you, okay, I've done a podcast and I do vlogs, and podcasts are just so much easier to produce because you're only having to script, really. You're only having to script the dialogue and the narration and maybe an interview if you get into interviews. But that's it, and with vlogs, it's just so much harder to have to add on that second layer visual, because visual, the sky's the limit with visual. Number 2, there's more opportunity to connect with your target audience through podcasts than there are with video. And there's definitely going to be some people who disagree with me on that, but because podcasts are only audio, there's more opportunity for a person to listen to something versus listening and watching something, right? Because now you need their complete and full attention. Not to say that you don't have a person's full attention when they're listening to a podcast, but for me, I started to listen to podcasts at the gym. I stopped listening to music. I would only listen to podcasts. I listen to podcasts in the car during my commute, when I'm cleaning, when I'm doing yoga even. And like I said, there's definitely more opportunity in someone's life to just listen to something versus have to listen and look at something. Also, what's great is that you can, as a podcaster, become a part of someone's routine, right? So for me, if it's my routine to listen to podcasts at the gym, then every time I go to the gym, I'm going to listen to your podcast, because now you've become part of my routine. Going off of that, podcasts are on the rise. It's a big reason why I decided to start my entrepreneurial journey, was because I went to a digital marketing conference last year. And one of the biggest takeaways from that conference was that podcasts are on the rise. And, there's still a lot of people who are new to podcasts. I would probably, be willing to bet that a lot of you have not listened to podcasts before. But, once people listen to one good podcast, then they're kind of hooked, is what I've noticed. And the trends that I've read. So there's definitely a growing audience for podcasts. And then also, number 3, podcast audiences are extremely loyal. So again, you could probably say this for any medium. You could say this about vloggers on YouTube. But I think because podcasters, at least the ones I've listened to, have really figured out a great way to fold in advertising so that you don't really feel like you're being advertised to. You have your listener actually listen to the ad and your call to action. Whereas on YouTube, it's like, oh, this is an ad, I'm going to skip, right? But yeah, what I've noticed is that, I've listened to podcasts that started out from nothing. I listened from when their first episode was launched, and they've all grown, and a lot of that was because of the calls to action that the podcaster would make on the podcast, and their audience would actually respond. And I can name 3 podcasts that have started out from nothing and are now huge and have audiences of thousands and thousands and thousands. It's definitely possible to build a loyal following that actually converts through podcasts. So I'm going to talk about my 5 favorite podcasts. Again, as you listen to them, the reason why I picked these, I have a lot of other favorites, but the reason why I picked these is because these specifically sparked an emotional response in me as I was listening to them. And that's what you want to do for any audience online, whether you do video or audio or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. What you want to do as an entrepreneur or a personal brand is spark an emotional response, because that emotional response is what creates the opportunity for someone to take action, right? And for someone to actually convert and buy your product or inquire about your service or whatever. Also, I'm going to leave the link to all of these podcasts on iTunes in the description below, and they're all free. So my all-time favorite podcast is Serial. And this was the podcast that introduced me to podcasts to begin with. It's a story about a murder case that happened in 1999, and the narrator, the journalist, Sarah Koenig, who is amazing, she basically revisits the case 15 years later. The investigative journalism and just, the storytelling and the emotions that it sparked in me were just so impactful. And, it's still probably one of the most popular podcasts ever. Second favorite podcast is Lore. So Lore is one of those podcasts that I listened to from when it started. Aaron Mahnke, the author, I guess, or the podcaster of this show, is an amazing, amazing storyteller. I think out of all these podcasts that I'm going to talk about, he's my favorite storyteller. And Lore is a podcast about legends and myths that we have in popular culture and history. He goes into the origins of them. This is proof that storytelling can be so compelling, is because the way that Aaron Mahnke tells the history behind a myth, it really sticks with you because his storytelling is so great. If you've never listened to Lore before, I'll link you my favorite episode in the description below. It's episode 8 called The Castle. I do have to warn you, all the myths that he goes into are scary myths. So it is creepy. It's a scary show, horror, that type of deal. So just FYI, if you're not into that, you might not want to listen to it. So third favorite podcast is going to be especially relevant if you are a startup or a newbie entrepreneur, is the podcast called Startup, and it follows the story of the narrator who is starting a company called Gimlet Media, which is a podcast media company. And it's just so great because even though his startup is a company with employees and, he had to get a lot of venture capital funding and stuff like that, they just go through the same struggles that any entrepreneur goes through. Another great one for entrepreneurs is the podcast called Unemployable. The whole podcast is about, entrepreneurship and how to build a brand and marketing. It talks about anything that's entrepreneurial related. So definitely check it out. He talks about different topics, so you can just pick one that you think is relevant for you. Lastly, Radiolab. Radiolab is probably the podcast that I've been listening to the longest. It is just such a fascinating podcast, and it focuses on psychology and how people work and think and connect and communicate. And it was the first podcast, actually it was probably the very first time ever in my life that I remember actually questioning the world. I know that's so deep and random, but it wasn't until I listened to Radiolab where it was why are things the way that they are? And Radiolab, they do interviews and they talk about the history of things and stuff. It's just such a great podcast if you want to learn about people. I'm fascinated about people. I love learning about people. So it's one of my favorite podcasts. So to end, I'm going to link to you my first and only podcast that I've ever created. You can click here. Well, you're going to listen to it. There's no visual. So I'm still debating what I'm going to have as the visual because I'm putting it on YouTube. Might just be a black screen. But if you care to listen to it, check it out. All right. Catch you guys later. Bye.